Finally, using the magic of AI, I am able to extrapolate the voice versus the sound background of this video so I can finally figure out what the hell Bruce Willis says here, courtesy of vocalremover.org. Oh, it works really good. Just drag the file, move this slider up and down. It also works for music versus voice. And there you go. The moment of truth. I finally get to understand what he says.
Easy on the contestant.
Oh, duh. That was so obvious. Why didn't I think of that earlier? Devilman is an insert nuance of game that people can relate to in this game, just like Grimbeard Does It simulator developed and published by Bandai for the PSX and Windows in the year 2000. It's based off the manga from the 70s, which apparently was way ahead of its time, influencing countless story arcs to come. In researching the original issues, I can follow along quite well. They're so well drawn that I can certainly tell what is going on without too much additional help. It also triggered a memory of one of my favorite issues of Heavy Metal magazine, which I so happen to have a back issue for, as I suspect that writer may have inadvertently took inspiration from this, or advertent, I won't judge. It's one of the many incredible short stories told through well-colored paper. If you haven't partook, I highly recommend them. Teddy Bear, a brutally violent, sexist, trope-ridden caper featuring a drug-addicted DEA agent with the most bulbous nose in protagonist history, remains one of my favorite reads. Not being a huge comic book fan, I really like these short stories that wrap things up in a bow, and I don't demand I read other issues to get references or to wait for the next chapter of a story. It also kind of maybe was a window into my adolescence, that in an era before everyone had access to the internet in the palm of their hand and a free hand to do whatever with, it was a godsend to a 15-year-old me. That dude works out. So, Devilman. Disclosure time! I have zero knowledge of Japanese, how to pronounce even the simplest of salutations, and barely know of anyone in this manga. I found this disc online, and I was intrigued at the opening FMV sequence, along with the initial time playing, since it reminded me a bit of Dino Crisis on the PSX. As a challenge to myself, I thought I would proceed through the game to see what it's all about, using Google Translate on my phone to capture the subtitles and see what may be the only free website to use AI to transcribe audio to attempt to translate each cutscene. The results of this effort will become self-evident, I promise you that. Rest assured, I am putting a lot of liberty into each result of the translation, as even if the software had no issues with the best of audio examples, still suffers from some bad audio mixing, making this perfectly par for every similar title at the time. So feel free to start correcting whatever I put on screen, since there is zero chance that I am within 75% accuracy of whatever is going on, let alone any semblance of tone. For all I know, this game is fucking with its audience and going with an Evil Dead 2 vibe, or playing it straight. For now, let's just say it's straight.
父が死んだ。自殺だよ。
何？アスカ教授が？
ガソリンをかぶって火をつけた。黒焦げになった父の死体は体重が生きている時の倍あった。父は遺産を残した。恐ろしい遺産を。不動明、君にも父が残した恐怖の遺産を受けてもらいたい。
俺は親友アスカ亮の奇妙な言葉に誘われアスカ邸へと出向いたのだった。この後起こる俺の運命を大きく変えるような出来事があるとも知らずに。
The game begins in a dimly lit street. Our shotgun-wielding Dick Tracy-inspired friend, Ryo, explains that his father ate a 10-foot hoagie by setting himself on fire in his mansion. He then escorts us to the inexplicably massive abode to show off a mask of Akumu, which appears to be a gateway or visor to a devilish realm. Ryo explains, to the best of my understanding, that the devils once had the ability to combine with other creatures, morphing them into something else entirely. And I'm again taking some liberties here, but based off of my repeated attempts to translate this dialogue, seems to point in the direction that Ryo's father was about to be assimilated by such a devil before setting himself ablaze to avoid such a fate. Ryo wants to get to the bottom of what is going on, and is bringing her wimpy hero along for the ride. Our hero, Akira Fudo, despite being a wussily dressed nerd with zero survival instincts, has a 3-foot vertical and could probably dunk on currently 2000's famous basketball star Shaquille O'Neal. He also has an awkward crawl that can only be outdone by a desperate Lara Croft trying to entice horny boys rather than innovate her game engine. Topping off his moveset are dodges in each direction of his tank controls, a 180-degree turn, and a reverse dodge. He can sneak around loud thumpy floors by holding down the circle button, with an adorable animation reminiscent of someone trying not to wake up their parents after curfew. Moving things along, we are guided to a cutscene where Ryo defends Akira with a well-placed shotgun blast before being separated once again. The objective in this area is very simple, just to get to the key at the end of a maze-like mansion while being chased around by a gigantic spider demon. You'll want to sneak around when the ch-ch sound is not moving quickly, as this is indicative of a non-alerted spider demon. However, when the ch-ch is rapidly approaching, the level of tension is added that is appreciated. It's really tough to avoid the attacks, but it is possible at times, along with the various obstacles placed around. It's overall a very simple affair to get to the end of the first floor, retrieve the key, and return to the initial door blocking progress. You'll find another key in the room where apparently the self-immolation occurred by Ryo's father, along with a diary entry. Day 1. John, who used to be so affectionate with me, has recently started barking at me. Have you noticed anything strange about my body? Today I only remember about 2 hours of it. What on earth am I doing with the rest of my time? Just thinking about it scares me. Girl, I know exactly what you mean. Day 2. John keeps barking. Is it because I haven't fed him in a while? John is barking again. I need to feed him. What a noisy dog. Oh, it's so noisy. I need to punish that dog more than just feed him. Day 3. The punishment must have worked as the cat finally quieted down. The birds and the dog have had enough. Now for something bigger. I'm sure Ryo would have been more obedient if his head was cut off, just like John. I can't wait for Ryo to come home. This links into a cutscene where we further discuss the origins of the characters, which seems very redundant at this point, but I also think that this is how these stories are told. Pressing onward, we avoid the spider thing a couple of more times, and we find ourselves in what might have been some kind of puzzle if I had not solved it instantly. Past this door, in what appears to be a courtyard maybe, Akira is startled by a kitty cat.
お前も俺と同じ迷子か。どうした急に。ああ！おいで逃げるんだ。僕の人生これまでか。
Just past this encounter, I shout out loud, "Oh no," as the jumping thus far looked terrible to control. It's not too bad here, as while you can sink into the abyss, it follows the Zelda Link to the Past rules, with a chunk of health taken off if you fall. You also won't fall in outright, as you are protected from edges until you perform the jump. Past the worm, you finally reach the second floor. I love how all these old games have characters just nonchalantly walking up when there is a 30-foot tall worm that is right behind them. I would be face-planting into these steps, screaming and farting the entire way up. On this floor, we encounter similar trials with a bit of added complexity. We are now being chased by whatever the fuck this thing is, which combined with certain camera angles managed to give me a bit of that old-school Goosebumps reaction. It's unfortunate that there's not much in the way of negating damage from this enemy, as it's really tough to telegraph its attacks to tank swing your character out of its way. It can be done, it just takes a lot of practice, which unfortunately I ended up getting. Reaching the balcony, you are given a convenient save point right before this ominous door. Just past it is our kitty cat. Psych!
お前無事だったのか。怪我してて 歩けないのか？そんな。
The cat has become one with the giant spider, creating a hybrid of acronid that pretends to love you in exchange for food. This is an interesting sequence, as the spider cat has no issues catching up with the player, as your lengthy but depleting stamina bar comes finally into play. Don't run completely out, or you are stuck, not even able to menu in to use a stamina pill. How did I not put a Viagra joke in here? Jeez. Oh, never mind. In real life, those pills take about 30 minutes to get going. I mean, so I'm told. I wouldn't know. Reaching the end of the balcony, the spider cat gives up chase. Or does it? It does not. Ryo saves Akira's ass with a flurry of shotgun blasts, and all of the software tricks in the world can't isolate what Ryo is actually saying, so my translation is going to be way off the mark. But here goes.
あれを見ろ。体が突き刺さり身動きが取れないながらもまだなお残った手足をバタつかせ戦おうとしている。凄まじい闘争本能と生命力だ。地下へ急ごう。不動。行くぞ。
I don't even need a translator for that shit. It's the only thing you say after shotgunning a door open, and I would know. I'm not allowed to have weapons. Now that we are in the warehouse, Ryo is jumped by this obnoxious enemy and injured. It's now up to Akira to run through this giant area to collect a couple of fuses and a capacitor to get the elevator running again. What is poorly telegraphed is that you need to go up, basically from the direction you came from, to collect one of the fuses, causing me to fuck about longer than I cared to in this area. You'll also need to descend into this lower area, hand over hand, and evade another enemy in an overhead segment. It's decent, but the mind wanders in how much of this can they do before I get real tired of running from everything. Once you collect all the things, you are automatically taken back to the elevator once you've placed it in this power supply. Ryo gives an ultimatum to Akira before descending lower, who's eager to kick some demon ass, until they arrive at the gore room. The gore room is where I really struggled translating this game directly, as there are certainly deeper tones going on that the software just can't capture. But from what I gather, there is a ritual here that Ryo was trying to prevent from happening, where humans voluntarily combine with the demon host. Out of options, Ryo jumps further into the hole, Silent Hill 2 style, and it is at this lowest level goes completely psychopath on Akira. After Akira runs around like a wussy from Ryo's barrage of gunfire, Ryo finally gives up, admitting that killing him was a last resort. They are then interrupted by a giant demon bursting from the ground. Ryo is thrown across the room while Akira falls on his ass as the demon gains a hold of him, prompting a minigame of mashing buttons. The game, not realizing I am a tapping god, gives up quickly. Suddenly, the powers of anime take over Akira as he becomes one with the powers of the devil somehow, and becomes the titular main character.
アモンではない。お前たちデーモン族、一人残らず地上から消すために生まれた悪魔、デビルマンだ。
悪魔に。ひょっとすると、俺は人類の味方を作ろうとして、人類最大の敵を作ってしまったのではないだろうか。
Bear in mind, this concept was introduced originally in a manga from 1972, which by my accounts is a long-ass time ago, making this a very early piece of media to use this type of narrative. So making fun of this translation isn't particularly fair. To me, it's also kind of fun watching our wuss suddenly decide he's a badass and start beating the shit out of this demon thing. Chapter 1 complete. Our interlude shows us a sad cutscene where a child does not want to go home to his mother as she's abusing him at home. Mom shows up in the middle of this conversation and insists the boy come home, diffusing his anxiety by informing him that his dad is home early to protect him. Being the dumb little shit that he is, he believes her. Never fear, however, Dad is home, if you count the fact that his face is now a wolf face. Chapter 2 continues a short time later in a subway train. The party inside of the car remarks on how swole our hero now is. This surprisingly hot PSX character, Mickey, is chatting up Akira prior to a catastrophic event, wrecking the train and separating everyone from our guy. We start to notice how much our protagonist has improved since our last chapter, as our jump, crawl, and sneak options are now replaced with beatdown moves. His energy levels is replaced with a rage meter, so tiring out is no longer a factor. Entering the train car, our first concern is a dead girl that is dressed exactly the same as our girlfriend, but just so happens to be a red herring. This poor woman, she died as she lived. Do you get it? That's terrible. I should cut that joke out later. From here, the game becomes simplified greatly. Your job now is to bash the living fuck out of every demon you see. Instead of a simple menu screen to choose between a map and items, pressing select now changes Akira into Devilman, septupling his size and features a new moveset. Unlike most games that have a charge-up mechanic, this one allows you to stay in that form for almost the entire game and does not take particularly long to charge into it. I dig it for that reason, as it's a nice power fantasy. Too many games that let you play as a superhero limit your time and resources in an effort to gamify it, and I always backpacked such features, never using them until boss fights and such. The fighting, it's okay. It's a very difficult thing to critique for this era. A very late entry into the PSX's library still puts it way before game developers discovered the idea that fighting AI enemies in a brawler sucks ass at the best of times. And they did what they could here. Enemies, and fortunately Devilman has iframes in their attacks, making some attacks go directly through the opponent when it should be a solid hit. Other times, you're allowed to pull off combos that send them to the ground, to where you can ground pound them with a delightful schlop sound effect that is hilariously out of place. You can also psychic blast your enemies with a cool anime moment of button mashing, to where the victor gets to land a free hit. Dodging can work wonders too. It's really not bad, until it is, but we'll get to that. We find Rio, who shows up out of nowhere to lend us some more advice, I think. Our objective, it seems, is to rescue as many people in the subway and sewer systems as possible, while finding Akira's friends along the way. Did I mention that the last third of the game is pretty much one gigantic sewer map? Because it is. You can't copyright an idea, Civvy, come at me. Our first set of victims are trapped inside concrete. Saving the people from concrete requires finding side rooms and beating the faces off of the walls. Eventually you meet up with the culprit, whom I'm dubbing the Shit Demon. He seems to have the ability to control concrete, which is one of the sillier fictional superpowers that I've witnessed, as the walls literally close in during this boss fight. Once you beat the shit out of them, the next stage is running into random people that run up and try to beat you down. Attacking them in Devilman form will kill them, and Rio interrupts the murder to explain how these people are being controlled and need to be dealt with gently. Kicking them in a dick or box in human form will make them puke out their essence of evil that is possessing them. As far as I can tell, the same cutscene plays out regardless of how you deal with this initial guy, so how the game ends up may or may not be changed by your actions. For now, I elect to keep everyone alive that I can, since at the very least, these enemies are completely trivial. Once I clear the area of both demons and kick the junk of every civvy I can save, the gate opens, allowing the next boss fight to occur. First, one more innocent to punch in the stomach. See, it's okay to punch kids, as long as it's for his own good. Don't give him ipecac or something, just punch that kid right in the damn liver, fix you right up. The boss starts to ramp up the challenge of the fighting, with his HP having much higher levels and his damage output much more upsetting. But I'm sure this won't get much worse, right? The next cutscene has a rather disturbing turtle demon absorb this man before ominously premonitioning our upcoming battle. He also jokes about wanting to visit a hairdresser or hair salon, which on repeated attempts to retranslate continues to insist that's the punchline. I need to know the joke here. The next zone changes the scenery slightly but is lacking in any real substance. The gameplay loop is quickly becoming repetitious, but thankfully the map runs rather quick into the next encounter. Here, an incredibly frustrating fight commences with our alter ego, whom a couple of the demons up to this point have confused our protagonist for. He challenges you to a 1v1, and full disclosure, I had a really bad time with this fight the first time around. His attacks are bullshit. He teleports at incredibly unfair times, and has a fuck ton of health while dealing out said ton of damage as well. Unlike the majority of fights thus far, this one feels much more like luck landing hits rather than skill, making this a miserable experience. Once this is over, the demon changes form into whatever the hell this is, claiming to take a more psychic approach to battle. It proves to be a fruitless endeavor to fight this thing, so all you need to do is dodge the telekinesis for a brief period before this cutscene occurs.
りょう、俺は一体。そうだ、思い出した。俺はデーモンに囲まれて。りょう、デーモンは。
周りのデーモンたちは俺が来た時にはもうすでに死んでいた。
なぜだ。奴ら俺を殺せたのに。それに一体誰がこのデーモンを。
俺にもわからん。だがお前の命が助かったことだけで嬉しいよ。悪魔の生命力はさすがにすごいな。もう心配ないようだな。
こうしてる間にも新たな犠牲者が増えているかもしれない。
The next stage sets an urgent tone, with the music borrowing a bit from Silent Hill and what feels a bit like Legend of Legaea's dungeon tracks. You're instructed early on to rescue the other survivors from certain death, given a rolling timer that resets to 2 minutes or so with each person saved. This proves to break apart the samey mold that the game has had up to this point, and a welcome change to the scenery as well. When this intense area is cleared, it's on to the most disturbing part of the game by far. Like, holy shit, dude.
Satcha!
私死んだの。
死んだ。さっちゃん、死んだって。
怖かったわ。痛かったわ。腕を噛みちぎられ、体を引き裂かれて、血が噴き出したわ。ママと一緒に暮らすことも、パパに遊んでもらうこともできない。友達のみんなにさよならも言えないの。もうアキラ兄ちゃんに会うことも。まだ生きたかったのに。もっと生きていたかったのに。
This game wasn't exactly a family-friendly experience, but having a dead kid brother speak to you from a polymorphous back of a turtle demon was not on my Y2K bingo card. Now that it's time to beat this dude's ass, it's also unfortunately time to deal with an even cheaper, lamer, and lengthy boss battle that had me in a blaze of fury. Tons of iframes with each attack force you to find the lamest ways possible to dispatch this knob, and even worse, has probably the most HP of any enemy in the game, making this fight beyond infuriating. But at least killing the demon frees up Akira's brother. Just kidding, that kid is as dead as a doornail. Next stage. This area is basically a warm-up area for the final battle. Punch the shit out of these monsters to get your meter up, and if for some reason you're following along, make sure you get your life up and energy up as far as possible, since this is our last stop. Unfortunately, the danger music is blasting to 11 at this point, making the game nearly illegible for my various tricks to translate what the hell everyone is saying here. What I do gather is that this woman does not enjoy being drowned in a dynamic whirlpool, and this final dynamic form has 3 distinct heads and is cool as shit. I really like the detail of how to get to this third head. It needs to rotate all the way back through the front one rather than continuing to rotate. Which is good, since I'd hate to dock points off a game where you kick child-absorbing demon Ninja Turtles in the dick for a lack of realism. The ensuing fight is a pile of garbage, suited perfectly for a final boss in this era of gaming, where any rules you thought were established can randomly stop at the drop of a pin. Regardless of my whining, we reach a final phase of the fight where a timer is added, presumably changing your presumed girlfriend to die if you aren't able to topple this thing in time.
これが終わりではない。これからが始まりだ。もうすぐそこまで。
全て終わったな。
ああ、デーモンの気配も消えた。
レスキュー隊が来ている。ここはもう彼らに任せて大丈夫だろう。
Thus ends the first run of the campaign. By achieving the rank of C or higher, we are able to do a fresh run of the campaign with using the original clothing of Devilman from the 70s, which apparently has a few additional changes to the story towards the end. Curious if this is true, I bravely enter into the game for a second time, is what I would say if I had the time or ambition. The end.
Zoik!
I actually did replay the game a second time, blasting through the first act in a speedrun, blissfully ignorant of the fact that our hero is completely revoiced in every cutscene, presumably by the original TV show's voice actor.
手に入れたぞ、悪魔の力。俺はデビルマンだ。
At the end of this playthrough, it's taunted that you need an A ranking, or a ranking above A in special mode, prompting me to replay the second time faster and without procting this sequence against the turtle demon. Nope. Turns out to get to the third chapter, it needs to be done in a fresh, regular playthrough, prompting me to play through a third time, according to this walkthrough written by someone who is definitely not an English native speaker. This game also has another secret level, this time a beautiful idea, which is called Special Chapter, and this is TV version of the game. There is a new soundtrack, new combos and fatalities, new storyline, and especially the signing of Devilman. There is only one flaw. It is easier to get to Chapter 3. Basically, just complete the game once, Chapter 1 and 2, within 2 hours, and you will see a new entry in the menu that says Special. For the record, this is completely incorrect. You have to use the regular game in order to unlock Chapter 3. To achieve this, you need to beat the game in under 2 hours, save less than 10 times, and rescue all 18 people that you can save. And definitely not the kid. Oh, and you don't use any healing items in the first chapter. This proves to be a simple ordeal until it isn't, as I'll mention shortly. By now, I have the first area on lock, including a trick or two to save a bunch of time, and I start flying through the fights, learning of yet more moves that Devilman is capable of doing, including this ground attack that affects the fight against the Mean Bean. Finally, after yet another playthrough, we get the third chapter in its full glory.
デーモンの秘密を知り、デーモンの能力を得た不動明。 デビルマン、お前を生かしておくわけにはいかない。美しき月よ、そなたはこれから起こることを見ぬ方がよい。醜い血で染まりたくないならば。
This character, Celine, whom I assume manga fans know, rips Akira right out of the roof of the ambulance carrying his girlfriend, and is being taunted as he's lifted into the air. She reciprocates Ryo's saving shotgun blast with a flying projectile arm, throwing Ryo right into the air as well. This allows Devilman to 1v1 Celine, whom proves to be very first phasey. Sure enough, you take flight to engage in the most infuriating boss battle I've encountered in quite some time, negating my now blatant use of save states just to get this shit over with. Once she's down to minimal health, an unbelievably frustrating sequence takes place, where her arm begins to fly around out of camera to strike down Devilman as she teleports automatically from any danger. The only way to win is to use a telepathic beam, lock on, and tap your goddamn life away as you pray that the arm doesn't pop out of nowhere to take a huge chunk of health off. It is extremely hard to tap fast enough to beat her, but I finally got some kind of timing down that the game allowed me to finally reach her ass, or rather her noggin, prompting whatever the hell transpires here.
どうだご自慢の爪の味は。自分で食らうのは初めてだろう。
よくもやったな、デビルマン。お力をシレーヌに、デビルマンを打ち倒すお力を。このままではシレーヌは死にきれません。カイム。
シレーヌ、俺の体を使え、合体だ。
Again, I'm not in on the loop here, but I can safely assume that this is to be continued. It's a cool mechanic to allow a final battle gatekept behind a repeated playthrough, although I assume many people would disagree with that assessment. My only gripe is just how ball-breakingly hard they made that fight out of cheapness, as there's no way I would have had the patience for this, unless it was my only game I owned for like 6 months, or chained up in a dungeon, or both. It doesn't have to be a false dichotomy. Devilman looks pretty decent for the time period, sometimes showcasing some very interesting monster designs, and the characters are rendered decently enough. The environments are okay as well. Nothing is going to blow your trash lid off. But if I were to pull myself back into that era of gaming, I would say each act did a good job of putting the player into that environment. The only things I feel are missing are subtle effects, ambience like fog or raindrops on windows. You know, the Western horror tropes that belong in this Eastern-style horror trope. I can't even joke about tropes, as this game is based on something that predates even my old ass, so in my opinion, they can do whatever the hell they want with this vision of this intellectual property. The music is often good, sometimes borrowing a bit from Silent Hill's iconic percussive metal drumming. Other times taking a more standard horror fare. It gets the job done. I just hate its mixing with the audio, as there's no way to adjust it. It's not the worst audio mixing I've ever heard, but Ryo in particular mumbles a lot in rather tense moments where the music is blasting, making it a total bitch to hear.
並外れた強い体力を持つお前も
The overall presentation does its job, but never feels like it's its own take on the genre, but more of an homage to Silent Hill, Clock Tower, and most certainly Dino Crisis. I can't speak to any of the acting, since they could be the worst Japanese actors of all time, and I would not know the difference. But the Resident Evil style pausing between characters is front and center of each cutscene, so I can at least attest to the now iconic pacing of each conversation.
どうしたの進む？もう夕飯できてるのよ。
おばさん
I really enjoyed the gameplay elements that Devilman has. I was drawn in on the potential for a horror game that I was never aware of, and while initially stagnant on scares, managed to deliver some proper tension when running away from the various Goonies. I was quickly picking up on how little the game could hold on its own merit if the gameplay continued down the path that it went, and just like that, it became a completely different game, one where you get to feel the change in the protagonist personally, by going from a wiener that runs and ducks around shit all the time to one that actively murders gigantic demons with ease. One or the other would have been quite the mediocre experience, but by having both genres in a single gameplay loop, it manages to soar above mediocrity to a solid 6.5. The first act has a menu system designed as a light Resident Evil hill tower with a limited stamina gauge. It made me think that preserving your consumables was going to be paramount in the long-term survival of the character, despite having vials on the floor that instantly replenish both. But once Akira becomes Devilman, master of the bench press, the stamina bar becomes essentially a rage meter, one that depletes in devil form quite slowly and is rarely an issue to maintain. Even in human form, Akira can simply whoop demon ass, merely taking longer to get the job done. The combos are decent to perform, and I late discovered how you can ground pound quite effectively by pressing square and X while sprinting up to a downed opponent. Both acts managed to end right around when I felt like it was starting to overstay its welcome in the gameplay department, which isn't long at all, meaning this is an incredibly rare old game that knows when to end the fucker rather than stretch out its runtime. It's a thing of beauty, no doubt related to the fact that it never made it stateside, since most games required artificial means to stretch that shit out so you couldn't just rent the game and beat it in an evening, which I would say was more than possible here. The repeated playthroughs are an interesting touch. Having the Devilman 70s theme playing in certain boss fights immediately changes the tone of the game to something almost whimsical. It's annoying that you can't just get the true ending in this mode, especially given that the poorly translated screen here is flat out telling you that you can. So that's going to dock you a point there, Japanese game from 25 years ago. Would I recommend Devilman? That depends. If you've made it through this review, I think I managed to spoil the best part of the game. The brief but engaging journey of this lovably pants-shitting loser becoming a god-killing demon human hybrid was made much more interesting for me by simply being in the dark about what this story was about, especially in my attempt to dissect the dialogue using whatever means at my disposal. As a game, it melds two different genres that would not hold on its own by itself, but by combining the two creates a very interesting hybrid, not unlike this cat spider. Those that are a fan of the manga probably will pick apart the changes made to the storyline, as all nerds do, so I'm not even sure if I'd recommend that either. Was it a missed opportunity for Sony to bring this overseas? Nah, not in my opinion. This probably would have flopped given the amount of time and effort it would have taken to localize this. But maybe I'm wrong, but since I'm the one editing this video, I'm not. How convenient. Now we have everything wrapped up in a neat little package. Really, I mean that. Sorry if it sounded sarcastic. Thank you for watching and subscribing to my shit. Thanks again to my Patreons, South Boogie Bio, It's Joe's Fault, Hiroshima, Porygon for the Win, and Servo K. I am slowly but surely working up to an actual reason to subscribe to me other than just being super nice. But yeah, I'll get there at some point. As of this recording, I am 2 days from 1 full year from my upload of the Broken Helix review, and wow, what a year it's been. So by my math, if we follow the same pattern, I should have 25,346 subscribers by this time next year. And a year after that, 401,000. Man, I'm gonna be so popular. All jokes aside, numbers don't matter. It's the community, and what a nice group of people y'all are. Really, I appreciate it. I love these old school publications. Look at those graphics, dude. Just amazing. And these letters to the editor. Oh, good times. No life. I've devised a special playing. Oh. System for Final Fantasy VII. Make no contact with other life forms. If there's no isolation area, refer to this method. Move the television and PlayStation into the bathroom. Move the refrigerator into the bathroom as well. Sit on the seat. Lift up your legs or they get numb. Using this method, you can relieve all bodily functions easily except sleep, but who needs that? Oh yeah, I wrote that. What did Bill have to say? Wow, Pat, that's one surefire system, and don't worry. I chose a life of celibacy.